Hey there, ready to unpack these Canadian immigration application processing times?
Absolutely.
We know you're eager to kind of get a sense of what to expect.
Yeah.
And honestly, who wouldn't be? It's a
Huge.
big life move. And understanding that timeline is like such a big piece of it.
100%.
And you've smartly come with like a stack of government web pages to help us do just that. We've got how are processing times calculated?
Mhm.
How long will it take to process my application?
Mm.
What are processing times? When does my processing time start?
Mhm.
Why can't I see my application status in the client application status
Yeah.
tool? Why do some application processing times change and others do not?
Mhm.
And why is my application considered complex or non-routine? And what does that mean for me?
It's a lot.
Quite the lineup.
Yeah.
But don't worry, we're going to break it all down together.
We're gonna translate the official language into, something that, hopefully makes a bit more sense.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So, first things first, those processing times listed on the government website, they can feel a bit like hoping for the best.
They are, and I think that's the key takeaway from how long will it take to process my application. They
Yeah.
explicitly state they can't give you an exact date. It's more about understanding the range and then the factors that influence it.
Right. Yeah. It tempting to kind of treat it like a countdown, but it's almost more like a recipe where the cooking time can vary based on your oven
That's a great way to put it.
and all that kind of stuff.
What are processing times? Kind of lays out those ingredients for us. So the complexity of your application, how complete it is, verification processes, even how quickly you respond to requests,
Right.
all of that can impact the timeline.
And I bet the type of application you're submitting plays a big role too, right? Like,
Yeah.
I imagine a skilled worker application has like a different flow than a family sponsorship.
100%. Yeah, they have different categories, right? So you've got like your economic class, your family class, refugee programs, and they each kind of have their own nuances and average processing times. And it's also important to remember that they're constantly being recalculated.
Right. And they've actually, I was going to say that how are processing times calculated? Page really caught my eye because they've actually shifted gears on how they calculate certain processing times as of May 1st of this year.
Yes, this is actually a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Instead of just relying on how long it took to process 80% of similar applications in the past, they're factoring in current workloads, application volumes.
Right.
So it's a
Yeah.
big change.
It's like how, I don't know, weather forecasting has evolved. It's not just about like what happened last September,
Hmm.
but also considering like the current conditions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And while this new model is only being used for certain application types right now, I think it indicates a move towards a more responsive and transparent system overall.
Interesting. So if we think about it like a race, knowing when that clock starts ticking is pretty crucial, right?
Yeah.
Is it the moment I hit submit or is it when they actually get it? Because I imagine those could be different things.
For sure. And when does my processing time start? Clarifies that for us. If you mailed your application, the clock starts on the date they received it. But for online or in person applications, it's the submission date that marks the beginning of your processing journey.
Okay. So it's almost like that initial anticipation after you've sent an important email.
Yes.
You know, it's on its way, and now it's kind of out of your hands for a bit.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of that out of my hands feeling, let's talk about the client application status tool, or CAS as they call it. That, that online portal where you can, in theory, track your application's progress. In theory, sounds great.
Yeah.
But I've heard it can be a bit of a love-hate relationship.
It definitely can be. It's meant to provide transparency, but I think it can also lead to anxiety if you don't kind of understand the limitations of it.
Right. Like you're constantly refreshing the page, hoping for an update. And then you're
Yeah.
like, is it just me?
Mm.
Is my application like stuck in some like digital black hole?
Yeah, for sure. Exactly. And that's where why can't I see my application status in the client applications status CAS tool is kind of helpful because it reminds us that there are valid reasons why your status might not be immediately visible or even trackable at all in some cases. There's initial processing time, system updates, variations between different application types. So it's not always a cause for alarm.
Okay, that is reassuring.
Yeah.
It's like just because you don't see your pizza on the app's map yet doesn't mean they haven't started preparing it.
Exactly, 100%.
Right.
Now, even when applications are trackable through CAS, delays are still obviously a common concern. So it's helpful to kind of talk about okay, what are some reasons why those delays might happen? And why is my application considered complex or non routine? And what does that mean for me? Kind of dives into that a little
Yeah.
bit.
I was going to say I imagine anything out of the ordinary can really kind of throw a wrench in the gears, so to speak.
Absolutely. Think of it like this. A straightforward application is like going through, like a quick car wash.
Okay.
But when you add complexities, so let's say you've got a name change or a medical exam that's expired mid process,
Mm.
or you need to request additional documents, it's like adding those deluxe detailing packages. It's going to take more time.
Right, right. And while a longer processing time, like, isn't ideal, I guess it can also be reassuring in a way,
Yeah.
right? Like, it means that they're being thorough,
Yeah.
they're taking the time to get it right.
That's a great point. Complexity doesn't equal rejection. It just often means your application requires a more in depth review. And honestly, in those situations, a little extra scrutiny can be a good thing.
Totally, totally, especially given the importance of the outcome. Now, besides those kind of individual application factors, I imagine there are also just, like, larger systemic things that impact processing times too, right?
Mm,
Like, I don't know, maybe a sudden surge in applications or something.
for sure, yeah. Why do some application processing times change and others do not? Kind of speaks to that. Just like traffic patterns, right? Traffic patterns can be affected by rush hour or construction or special events. And in the same way, application volumes can fluctuate based on various factors.
Right, like those spikes in student visa applications before the school year starts.
Totally.
Or maybe, like, family sponsorships see a bump around the holidays.
Yeah, for sure.
It's fascinating how those real-world events can kinda ripple out.
It is. Yeah, it really just highlights that processing times, well, based on data,
Mm,
are ultimately part of a dynamic system influenced by like countless factors.
totally. So, given all of this, like, the variations, the complexities, the ever-changing nature of it all, what's, like, the most helpful way to think about processing times? Like, if I'm someone getting ready to apply, how should I be approaching this information?
That's such a good question. I think instead of viewing that estimated processing time as like a rigid deadline, think of it more as like a planning horizon.
Okay.
It's a tool to help you prepare, not a guarantee etched in stone.
So less, I'll be landing in Toronto by next spring, and more of a, okay, let's aim for next year and see how things unfold kind of mindset.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really just about understanding that while you can and should use that processing time as a guidepost, it's only one variable in a larger equation.
Right.
And that's really where I think focusing on what you can control becomes so important.
Right. Like making sure your application is complete,
Exactly.
responding promptly to any requests, keeping your contact information updated. Like those are all totally within your power.
Yes, you're not just passively waiting, you're actively participating in the process. And I think that sense of agency can make a huge difference in how you kind of experience this whole journey.
That's a really good point. Like it's empowering to remember that you have a role to play even during that waiting period.
Exactly. And while waiting is obviously rarely anyone's favorite activity,
Right.
I do think that time can also be an opportunity to really prepare for that new life in Canada. So think about language skills or professional networking, even researching different neighborhoods.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
That's kind of reframing the experience. It's not just about the finish line. It's about like using that whole journey for growth and preparation.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, a key takeaway from all of this is knowledge is power, especially when it comes to, something as important as immigration. By understanding the nuances of these processing times, you're just better equipped to manage expectations, reduce anxiety, and just approach the process, from a place of informed confidence.
Yeah, I love that. Understanding the system is kind of the key
Mm.
to navigating it effectively. And hey, well, we've covered like a lot of ground today.
Mm.
Remember, like your journey is unique. There are resources available to help you every step of the way.
Absolutely. And on that note, I'll leave you with this final thought. Knowing what you now know about how these processing times work, what steps are you going to take to embark on this journey feeling prepared and empowered?
Such a great question to ponder. And for everyone listening, we're cheering for you. Remember, you're not alone in this. And the Deep Dive team is always here to help you navigate the complexities, celebrate the milestones, and ultimately embrace that exciting journey ahead.